James Thatcher is a trade consultant, host of the TradeNerd.com. He sometimes goes by the name Big Jim, if you've seen him in our chat rooms or Discord. Thanks for talking to me, man. Good to have you joining us.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you, Tom. Always great time to be on DTNS.
Now, I've talked to you before about logistics, and there's a lot we could talk about that still, I'm sure. But with sales coming up, with the holiday season coming up, I wanted to talk about prices, because I see people talking about prices, and I see discounts where it's like the manufacturer discount or the retailer discount. So I figured this would be helpful in understanding when you're shopping for consumer electronics, like what goes into this pricing. So let's start real basic. Like, how does a company determine the price of something it's selling?
Well, the first thing they do is they take a Ouija board out. No, I'm kidding.
Or are you?
Well, some companies actually do that. Typically what you do is you look at what is the manufactured cost of a good. So you have to, find all your components, bill of material, labor cost, overhead, those types of things. And you come up with that information. Then based on that, you look at what else is competitive in the market to figure out what kind of profit percentage you can incur with that. Now that's the manufacturer. So if you're buying direct from a manufacturer, that's usually how they're kind of pricing things out. They're looking to try and make a certain spread. Now, the percentage of markup is typically called from what your purchase price is to what your sale price is typically rated in a percentage, and we call those points in the industry. Retailers call those points. So some companies look for a low point with massive volume. Some companies look for high points with small volume. Most are somewhere in between. Most are trying to get on typical 30 to, anywhere between 30 to 40% is pretty good as far as middleman. Retailers like to go a little higher because they have added cost with expenses such as marketing, the operations of any retail space that they have, and a lot more overhead.
So essentially, I think a lot of people think, well, the cost is how much it costs you to make it, and maybe a tiny bit more. And what you're saying is, if I'm getting this right, both from the manufacturer and even with retail, the cost is how much does it cost us to carry this, and then how much more can we get? Because we want to make as much. It's not just big companies that do this. Garage sale people do this. How much can we get on top of that?
Well, it's not just how much more can you get. It also comes back to, the money and the profit that you make on a product helps determine R&D expenses for future generations. It also helps determine marketing, sales, mergers and acquisitions purchases that you might be looking at doing in the future. And then you also have financial requirements, maybe through your investors. So, for example, if you are a privately held company by venture capitalists, they're looking for a certain percentage of return every single year to make their investment. If you're a publicly held company, you have to have an earnings per share ratio that keeps your investors happy. Otherwise, they start to dump your stock, and then the value of your company goes down. Yeah. So it's dependent on a lot of different factors such as size and industry, but for the most part, that's how price is looked at.
Yeah, the price is what people will pay, and there's a range in there that you can go and all of that, but it just has to be above what it cost, right?
Well, and then there's also things that you can go below cost. We've seen in the past certain companies, for example, Nintendo and Sony will go below cost on the hardware object just because they know they're going to make it up in the software. Those types of things are, what we used to call the old razor model of you would go and buy the razor for near to at cost, but you'd be sucked into buying all the razor blades at a specific cost that is way overly inflated, and that's where they make their money.
And I feel like that might help inform our next question, which is, okay, so how does a sale price work? If I've done all this work to determine what the price should be, why would I take 20% off on Black Friday?
Well, because you're trying to, it comes down to mix. I guess that's the cleanest way to say it. It comes down to a mix. What you're trying to do is you're trying to drive in people to come into your store. If you're doing either an online store or a physical store, it doesn't matter. You're trying to get people to spend time with you as a retailer to not only purchase the the low margin items that you might be selling, but also the high margin. So if you go in and you're shopping for a computer, okay, you buy the computer, maybe they're only making 3 to 5 points on that specific computer, but then you need a bag. Then you need a additional charger. You might need additional peripherals to go with it. And those items are what they're going to then build up that profit margin with as a whole of cart, I guess is the best way to look at it.
So it's not exactly the same as the loss leader thing we were just talking about where you sell below cost, but the idea is like, okay, I may not make as much on this one, but it'll pay off.
Right. So the idea behind a lot of these doorbuster deals is they keep that low because it's a doorbuster. They want people at the door. They want people to bust in and go for those specific items. But hey, while you're here, why don't you look at something over here that we make 40 to 50 points on so that we can turn around and justify the cost overall. The other thing to look at is, competition also plays into this a lot. And we have seen companies that will go out and do loss leader products for, not only for Black Friday, but they'll push that in through TVs are a good example of this. They'll push those TV costs from Black Friday all the way through the big game day, which we of course can't say, because
it's the Super Bowl. You're allowed to say it in some context, but I get
I'm not having the NFL come after me, Tom. But overall, they're going to push those because again, you come in and you buy the one thing, you're going to be coming back to buy more, and that's the overall.
You're building the habit, basically. Yeah.
You're building the habit and you're building the loyalty, and that's the other thing that we're seeing lately that a lot of these retailers are pushing more and more is consumer information, consumer points, consumer spending, to keep people in the door. This used to be very, very common with your warehouse and club experience groups such as Costco and BJ's and Sam's, where you would want to bring those people in, they pay a membership fee, but you can then target them and move products of mass bulk through there to keep your percentages high. But we're seeing that now with anything from going to buy bagels all the way to trying to get haircuts, where that intelligence and that information, if they can get you in with a doorbuster and they can get your information, then they can turn around and market to you better.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about pricing that consumers have? As someone who works in the industry, what's the thing you hear from people and you're like, no, that's not actually how it works?
Probably the biggest misconception is that the price is always fixed. There is never I've never worked in retail, in a retail environment where the price is always a fixed set price. Now, you might be running in a special situation, but most of the time, the prices are never completely fixed. You have additional costs that come and go as time weighs on. So I'll use an example from my background in industry with trade. We had a dock workers strike in October on the East Coast that drove pricing for anything that's coming into the East Coast up. Potential threat of that coming back in January as well. We'll talk about that in another show. But at this point, those threats make your costs go up. Well, your price, maybe you're not necessarily willing to cut that cost down even further. The other thing is that a lot of people think that when these companies cut their cost, oh, that's just the big retailer taking it on the nose. No, what happens is there is purchase incentive programs when you're a wholesaler or you're a manufacturer and you're selling to these big retailers. You're going in with your eyes wide open that you're going to have marketing dollars in there, not only for advertising the product, but also for taking costs on sale prices that could occur as well. So it's a two-way street, and sometimes the push is 50-50. Sometimes it's a little more towards the manufacturer. Sometimes it's a little more towards the retailer. But everybody shares the cost because that's where the volume goes.
Fantastic information. Big Jim, thank you so much for helping me understand this, helping everybody understand this. If folks want to keep up with you, where should they go?
Oh, well, there's always thetradenerd.com, but the best place to find me is on the DTNS Discord. Why aren't you in there, people? Come on, join us, have a fun time. Message me, and I'll be more than happy to talk more about the wonderful world of trade.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim.
Take care.